Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we'll be breaking down all things Bills Patriots and peeking ahead to this week's game at home in prime time on Thursday night versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in Bills Mafia. Dave, I guess we have to do this show, right? Like we are contractually obligated to do this post-game show. The Buffalo Bills falling to the New England Patriots in embarrassing fashion, getting shellacked, our defense getting shellacked by the league's most pathetic offense. I said it yesterday, a total systems failure. Took our offense way too long to wake up. Our defense, I mean, you allowed a game-winning drive to Mac freaking Jones. I mean, he looked like John Elway tossing his little dink and dunk passes down the field for that game winner and then ultimately losing that football game. But losses suck, they do, but I don't know about you, Dave, but this loss it's been extra taxing on me just because of how toxic some people in this fan base have sort of become on social media after the Buffalo Bills lose football games. The Ken Dorsey discourse, the Dawson Knox discourse. We can be critical of a football team like we're going to be on tonight's show and I don't know, not call for every single person to be cut or fired. Is that just me?
I think that people are letting the frustrations tip over. In reality, these frustrations are tipping over, I think, from the last 3 weeks, right? I think the fact that the Bills escaped last week's game against the Giants with a win maybe put a lid on that frustration from boiling over temporarily, right? But some of those same problems that we saw in that Giants game certainly poked their way through into this Patriots game. And really, since that Miami win and since that trip to London, this team has really not played, I think, up to the standard that a lot of people have expected. And the fact is, you played so well in that Miami game that these last 3 weeks seem just so almost like unbelievable to an extent that the team really can play this poorly. And look, the defense had really, with the injuries, kind of held its own, even against the Jags and really against the Giants for the most part. But the kind of broke, right? This game came into this game. The Pats were only averaging 12 points a game on offense, one of the worst offenses in the league, as you mentioned. And so I think this really it really all came together in a bad way this past game where the offense struggled. The defense finally showed. The injuries finally showed and crept in this game, and everything just kind of went sideways. So even saying all that, the Bills did have a lead with less than 2 minutes to go in the game.
I thought we had escaped again. Like I really did think that we had escaped again. It was funny because I was on vacation with my wife's family, and I was that asshole glued to his phone while everyone's at the beach. And I was trying to watch the game. And it was like ducking in and out of signal. And that last drive, I was like wandering around the beach, like somebody scanning for metal, except I was scanning for like a Wi-Fi signal or a 5G signal to try to catch the last drive of that game. And man, I thought we had it. I probably should have kept the phone away because every time I lost signal, the Bills scored. So I probably should have just kept the phone away. But the funny thing is about all of this discourse, right? Because I don't want to make it seem like we're Ken Dorsey apologists or we're Sean McDermott apologists or we're Bills apologists, because that is the reputation that we are getting here at Cover One. A lot of people are throwing sort of that label at a lot of people here at this network's feet. The funny thing is we did a show after the Bengals game, playoff game last year, setting our expectations for the offseason.
Mhm.
And we literally discussed what the Buffalo Bills should do at both coordinator spots. And I don't know if you remember your take, but my take was that the Buffalo Bills should have fired Ken Dorsey and they should have gone and chased a more veteran offensive play caller like Todd Monken, who ultimately ended up in Baltimore, or Eric Bieniemy, who ultimately ended up in Washington. I'm
Mhm.
all for the should Ken Dorsey be the offensive coordinator of this football team conversation. I just think it's unrealistic to have it in the middle of a football season. I think that's an off-season conversation.
Yeah, and I don't know how, and this is, I think a lot of people have been level-headed as well, in the sense that, like, what good does firing Ken Dorsey do right now in the middle of the season? Like, I don't necessarily think that even Joe Brady, guy in house, is like gonna be any kind of upgrade, right, over the course of the rest of the season, and we don't even know if that would be the case. The other angle to this is actually putting some blame at the feet of the quarterback of this team as
Yeah.
well, right? That there are guys that have been open. There are route combinations that have shown on the film that guys have been open, that taking certain reads and taking certain easier throws have been available to Josh Allen. And it comes back to some of the points that I've made in the past around, like, who is in his ear, who is in there during the meetings, during the week, putting it into his head that, hey, these can be your first reads. These can be reads that are easy throws. Is anyone in the room enforcing that? Doesn't seem like it. And then on game day, we see how it translates on the field to where those throws and those options where guys are open aren't being taken. So we can sit here and blame Ken Dorsey, and we can sit here and say he's had some tough moments. And I'm not going to say that he's been perfect either, because he has had some tough moments. But, like, to put the blame squarely at the feet of Ken Dorsey just seems short-sighted to me. And while he hasn't been great, we also need to take a look at QB1 and realize that he's also left some things on the
And
table here.
and that's why I think it's like a more nuanced conversation for the offseason. Because I mean, if you're the Buffalo Bills, what are you going to do? You're not. There are people who are like, fire Ken Dorsey tonight. He shouldn't get on the plane. Okay, you're going to fire the offensive coordinator on a short week when you have to be ready for a game on Thursday. Like, the reality is, if the Buffalo Bills were to make a change at offensive coordinator, and I don't think they're remotely close to even thinking about it, I think the conversation in Sean McDermott's mind and the Buffalo Bills front office mind needs to be had in the offseason. But I don't think it's going to be had this season. But if it was, your two options are Joe Brady or Mike Shula. Like, and if you're going to do it, it's either going to be after the Bucs game or it's going to be the Monday after the last game before the bye week, right? And then you have the full bye week, et cetera, to prepare the new offensive coordinator. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would probably be the time to have the conversation. Or if you're a fire Ken Dorsey person, that would probably be the time to shoot off the take, would be after Thursday night, depending on what happens, or the week of the bye week, because those are the two chances. If it doesn't happen then, it's not going to happen at all. I can almost guarantee you that. We got a super chat coming in here from Justin Tyndall. Always appreciate and super generous this evening with your $20 donation. We really do appreciate that super chat. He says down 18-7 against the Jags halfway through the fourth, down 22-10 against the Pats halfway through the fourth. Spread them out, play up tempo for 15 minutes in 3 games. We look dangerous, but oh no, that's not balanced enough for Sean McDermott. I think that there are layers to this conversation, and we're going to have talks about our offense tonight. And I think both me and you are going to suggest some things that we think the Buffalo Bills could do better on offense. And some of the things that Justin suggested, I think, are things that the Buffalo Bills could do. Go a little bit more up tempo, spread people out a little bit more. But I think it's also important to note, at least a little bit, that when teams have leads like that late in the game, they're also playing you different defensively, playing a little bit more prevent. So that could have something to do with it as well. But Dave, what are your thoughts on this super chat here from Justin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to say that than it is to actually put that into practice, like from the start of games. I mean, I'm in a group chat too with some buddies, and they're like, we need to go up tempo more. We need to do this and we need to do that. I'm like, that's fine. I think going up tempo, there's some merit to that. I don't disagree that there's some merit to that, but, like, you don't just hop into a 2-minute offense the entire game and expect that the results are going to be the same, because, like you said, I think defenses are going to be playing differently. Now, there's some merit to keeping certain defensive personnel on the field, right? If you don't want the defense to substitute, that is a good way to do that. If you want to kind of do the old Peyton Manning where you get everyone up to the line and then just take your time to kind of like survey things, move things around, but don't allow the defense to substitute. There's some merit to that. But I think if it was really as easy as just playing in that style all the time and it was that effective, then it would be pretty crazy that the team wouldn't do that all the time. So I think there is more to it. I think it's a little bit more complicated than just doing that at a moment's notice. But I don't want to totally discount that either, because I do think there is some merit to getting into a rhythm. And at times in this game, when Josh was up there in rhythm, taking the quick passing game, taking what was available, that was when things maybe started working better for the Bills. So I do think it's a combination maybe of that, and also, like, again, taking what the defense is giving you and not like coming off that first read just because it's like going to be a 5 to 6 yard play if it's the easy play. So yeah, I think, it is quite a nuanced conversation, but yeah, and Rod says, wasn't this supposed to be easier? It was supposed to be. It was supposed to be.
And that's the unfortunate part. And the Buffalo Bills got to do their business this Thursday, because this is a team, we're going to talk about it later. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a dangerous team on a short week with only 3 days to prepare. So we're going to have that conversation in a little bit as well. Before we get to our biggest takeaway from the game, Dawson Knox. That was, I think, the big news that came out of One Bills Drive today. Sean McDermott announced, listen, I posted on social media, and I was like, I think this guy is fighting through something that's pretty serious. I can't believe he's on the football field. And sure enough, Sean McDermott announced today that Dawson Knox is having surgery on his wrist. No timetable has been set for his return. Matt Perino sort of asked a follow-up question, like, what do you expect? Is it a week-to-week thing? Is it a month-to-month thing? And it sort of sounded like, from Sean McDermott's response, even though he was very, I don't want to say combative about it, but he was very not wanting to give away too much. It sounds like maybe an IR trip for Dawson Knox could be in the cards with his wrist surgery. So maybe at least 4 games. And as someone mentioned in the comment section, like, we could see the season for Dawson Knox here. Like, his season could legitimately be over. So something that Bills Mafia wanted. It's an unfortunate way for them to get it, but a majority of the fans are going to get what they want, and that is Dalton Kincaid as tight end number 1. And the Buffalo Bills are suddenly really thin at the tight end position because Quentin Morris is still working his way back from a high ankle sprain as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really thin, and I think that it's a little bit baffling to me, right? Unless there was some kind of re-aggravation of that wrist injury during the game, that to me would be the only reason he was out there to begin with in this game. Like, he had no injury designation going into the game. He was not on the injury report. He had no final designation. I shouldn't say he wasn't. He was on the injury report throughout the week, but he had no designation going into the game. So unless he re-aggravated this during the game, it seems like very odd to me that this news would come about today. So that wasn't mentioned necessarily by Sean McDermott. So it makes you wonder a little bit, like, what was really going on there. But I'm going to go ahead and believe that it had to have been a re-aggravation. Otherwise, what was he doing out there? And not to make excuses for him, but is that a reason potentially for why there's been a couple drops? Well, obviously a week ago, we know the wrist was still bothering him, but the big 4th down play in this game, he obviously had the drop. He did make the catch on the 2-point conversion later on, but has really been a non-factor, to be honest, for a better part of this season. So yeah, Dalton Kincaid show is about to commence. He did lead the way in receiving for this team this game. So a lot of people are going to get what they asked for here. And likely this means the Bills are going to be going back to a lot more 11 personnel would be my estimation.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. It looked like they were trending that way in this game as well. I don't have the numbers from SIS yet, but it looked like the Buffalo Bills went pretty heavy in the 11. Saw a good, decent amount of Deontay Hardy in this game against the Patriots. Saw a pretty decent amount of Khalil Shakir as well. All right, let's get now to our biggest takeaway for the game. So we always like to lead off the show every week with our one singular biggest takeaway, because me and you, we dissect the game. We analyze the game from every angle, maybe too many angles sometimes, and we overthink it. So our challenge at the top of every show is to think of one singular takeaway that we have from this football game. So I'll start with you, Dave. What is your singular takeaway? And then the comment section, if you had to take one thing from this football game, what is the one thing you're taking away from this football game?
Yeah, man, there's a lot you can go to. QB1, you could start with him. You could talk about, obviously, Dalton Kincaid kind of maybe stepping up. You can talk about a lot of things, but I think for me, the biggest takeaway in this game is that the injuries finally caught up to the Bills defense, and they played admirably in that game against the Jags. They played pretty well in that game against the Giants, another team who's been an abysmal offense, maybe feeding off the home crowd and just the fact that Tyrod Taylor was making his start there. But really, this game, the defense, the injuries, I think they really showed up. And I'm not saying it was rock bottom for this defense, because I don't want to go there, because
I think it get worse.
That's pretty harsh. But against a team in the Patriots who's only averaged 12 points a game, you give up 29 points. You give up some multiple long scoring touchdown drives, including that backbreaker at the end of the game when you somehow got the lead back and you just let the Patriots march down the field. I think, to me, that is a big story now going forward. Is, yes, they kind of masked it for about 2.5 games, but what is this defense going to be now the rest of the year, knowing that the floor is pretty low, right? When you give up 29 to a Patriots team has really struggled on offense this year. So I am concerned, and my biggest takeaway probably from this game is, what is this defense going to be now the rest of the year? No Trey White, no Matt Milano. Ed Oliver did have a limited practice today, so we'll see if he comes back, but no Daquan Jones. Like, it's really hurting, and that interior of that defensive line obviously made a big difference yesterday. So to me, my biggest takeaway is, like, what is this defense going to be now the rest of the year? Because that was a pretty subpar performance yesterday against a bad offense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm going to throw out some statistics in a moment, but first, Autumn comes in, says, singular takeaway, let Josh run when the grass is open again. He rarely picks up first downs with his legs, and defenses aren't as worried about it now. If Josh runs, the drop from Knox doesn't happen. Astro comes in and says Gabe Davis still isn't consistent enough to warrant a second contract. We'll talk about that a little bit this evening. I don't know if I think there's a lot of bad that happened in this game, so that's sort of like a niche thing, but I certainly see where you're coming from there. Action Jackson comes in and says the worst part is we need the offense to help the defense out with all the injuries on that side of the ball, and they're doing the exact opposite these past few weeks. And Rantingly coming in very similarly, saying one takeaway is that we currently cannot overcome a bad game from our defense, and that's what we got, a bad game from our defense. David W. comes in and says D played good, but I could feel them throwing up on themselves from a mile away on that last drive. To be honest, David, I don't think the defense played very well. I think that they treaded water in the first half, but when you look at just how historically bad the New England Patriots have been in offense this season, to allow 29 points, honestly, allowing anything more than 20 would have been pathetic. And we allowed almost 30 points in this football game. And my biggest takeaway, and I had a chance this week I was on vacation this week. I was out in California. I got to run into some other people. You know, they noticed my Bills gear. They would talk to me, got to talk to some family who are fans of other teams, etc. Like, I got out of the Bills bubble for a weekend. And the Buffalo Bills are an average football team. We're an average football team. With all of the injuries that we have sustained, we are an average football team. This Buffalo Bills defense, without Matt Milano, Trey White, and Daquan Jones, there's now been 209 snaps without the three of them. We've allowed 5.6 yards per play, which is 24th in the league. We've allowed a 103.9 QB rating to opposing QBs. That's 30th in the National Football League. We've had a 54.2% defensive success rate, which is 29th in the league. And we've allowed 53.3% third down conversions, which is worst in the National Football League.
Mm.
When our defense is now probably below average and our offense is not clicking. We have gone from a top 3 to 5 football team in the National Football League, which we have been for 4 years now, to we are now an average football team. We are now a mid football team. We are now with the New Orleans Saints of the world. We are now with the Atlanta Falcons of the world. We are now with the Indianapolis Colts of the world. We are now with, I'm trying to think of all just the average football teams out there right now, and there are plenty of them, right? The teams that tread 500 all season long. We are there again right now. The Bills probably have an opportunity to reset. We could have 4 or 5 more good years where we're on cloud 9. But I think for the rest of this season, we're probably going to be an average football team. And this is, in talking with football fans around the National Football League this weekend, this is what normal fans have to deal with. This is what we had to deal with when Rex Ryan was our head coach, when Doug Marrone was our head coach, when we had a mid-average football team. You have to ride the roller coaster. Some weeks you'll stomp an opponent and you'll have fun and you'll cheer and you'll be super happy. And the next week you'll get shit kicked by a team you think you're supposed to beat. Like that's the normal experience for a football fan of an average football team. And that's what the Buffalo Bills are right now. I think the one exception, the one silver lining is that despite the fact that he's been struggling, Josh Allen is still an all-world talent. And Josh Allen is still relatively outside of a dinged shoulder, healthy. And Stephon Diggs is still healthy. So there is, I think, a sliver of a chance the Buffalo Bills offense can find themselves. Maybe we can make a trade at the deadline and get the defense back a little bit. And we can go on a run. We can go on a heater. We can get hot. There are plenty of average football teams that have gone on heaters and found themselves in the Super Bowl, found themselves deep in the playoffs, right? So it's still possible to have a really fun and successful season, but we're an average football team right now. And I just think fans need to reset their expectations because this is what fans of average football teams have to deal with on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and obviously we've been spoiled with really good records in the regular season over the past couple of years, and we've been spoiled with really top end quarterback play for the past 4+ seasons. So it is a hard pill to swallow, and it is a hard pill to swallow, and it is tough to admit sometimes that QB1 is part of the problem right now as well, right? It's and you can't say, oh, the offense hasn't been picking up the defense and the defense is worn out and like the defense, like it finally caught up to them because the offense hasn't been holding their own, and not put some of the blame on Josh Allen, right? Like you can't, like it just doesn't make sense. So ultimately, you're right. I still think the Bills, maybe they are average right now. They have potential to be more than that. We'll see what kind of moves, if any, could be made at the trade deadline. I don't know if there's an end all be all move that kind of rights everything, but if you're Brandon Beane, you kind of have to look at this roster and think to yourself, like, this team is still good enough to go on a run. This team is still good enough if the offense can kind of find their groove back that they can be one of the upper echelon teams in the AFC and make a deep playoff run. And like you said, there have been teams in the past that have gotten hot at the right time. The New York Giants come to mind immediately in that regard. In the NFC,
Eagles without Carson Wentz come to mind.
Eagles without Carson Wentz. I mean, those are good examples of teams at the right time, just getting hot in the playoffs. So, as Aaron Quinn always says, like, your best football doesn't need to be played right now. It needs to be played heading into the playoffs and in the playoffs. So now the Bills just have to make sure they can still get to the playoffs, obviously. But and that's now going to be probably the objective, right, at this point.
Yeah, some good comments rolling in. John S. coming in saying, trailing early puts more pressure on an already struggling offense. Very uncomplimentary of them. Using Sean McDermott's words against him. I totally agree. I think Matt Perino made a great point today. He was like, hey, when we win the coin toss, maybe we shouldn't defer. Maybe we should take the ball on offense and try to score, as opposed to letting our defense, which is struggling out there on the field, to give us points and put us behind so early in the football game. David W. comes in and says that this team truly is average and we need to let Josh play with his hair on fire in order to keep up. And we're going to have that conversation later on in the show when we talk about where do the Buffalo Bills at the deadline? Do they try to stop the bleeding on defense, or do they maybe make a play for some offensive players and just try to outgun everybody and try to get things clicking on offense? It's going to be a question that the Buffalo Bills have to answer as the trade deadline approaches. Roy Collins coming in saying, "Damn it, Judge, we just did this for 17 years. Trust me, I know." And there are plenty of fan bases that have done it for as long or longer than us as well. I was talking to my brother-in-law, he was a Cardinals fan. I'm like, have I seen it kind of sounded like a conceited dick the last couple of years when I talk about my football team? He's like, yeah. And I was like, did you ever feel like that with the Arizona Cardinals? I mean, you guys made it to the Super Bowl like a decade or so ago. He goes, no, not really. We were 9-7. And that's another example of an average football team that got hot, right? With Kurt Warner and made it all the way to the Super Bowl. He's like, so like, we've never been good. So I've always just sort of rode the roller coaster of emotions and didn't take wins for granted and just sort of enjoyed the ride. So that's a great example there. So a bunch of good comments rolling in here as well. So we're going to get to talking about the offense because there's a lot to talk about on the offensive side of the football. But before we do, a word from the guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast on how you can best support us here at Cover One.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Great comment from Walter S. here saying San Francisco was 3-4 last year. Trades changed everything, right? The Christian McCaffrey trade. And they don't even have a quarterback. I think they do now. And Brock Purdy, he's decent. Even though I heard they're struggling tonight and he struggled last week, but yeah, San Francisco is a great example of that as well. All right, on to the offense. Before we get into all the negatives, how about the two maybe positive takeaways from this football game, right? Let's give our flowers to James Cook and to Dalton Kincaid. James Cook, 13 carries, 56 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, 3 catches, 46 yards, a tutty. So in total, 16 touches for 102 yards and a touchdown. Dalton Kincaid, 8 catches, 75 yards. I've said this before. I've been saying this since August, and I tweet it in August and I retweet it like every 3 weeks. This offense should be flowing through 3 dudes: Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, and James Cook. I think everybody else should be an auxiliary weapon on this football team. These should be the 3 guys that Ken Dorsey focuses on getting the ball into the hands of.
Yeah, and obviously for Diggs, wasn't maybe the most efficient game target to reception ratio. I mean, 12 targets, only brought in 6 catches, but Dalton Kincaid, when the Bills finally got things going a bit and he was crucial on, extending some of those drives and being sort of a safety valve for Josh Allen, 8 catches for 75 yards on 8 targets. So he caught every ball that he was targeted with in this game. And really made a difference. James Cook, the 3 for 46, and obviously the touchdown. And James Cook, on that touchdown catch and on some of his runs, really showing that he had a ton of good, like he was feeling it. I feel like James Cook this game, like balance was great. You could tell that even running up the middle, running around the sidelines, like even Charles Davis, who I generally find quite annoying, made a good point around how James Cook was like leaning into yardage and kind of really using his body well. And I felt like both him and Kincaid did that in this game. And I think that those 2 guys really were a bright spot. Obviously, Stephon Diggs got his, and a couple missed balls as well to him that were thrown off target. But Cook and Kincaid really shined, I thought. And for the people who've been clamoring to get Kincaid more involved, and 100% of his targets he caught in this game for 75 yards and led the way in receiving yards for the whole team. So Jared K says Charles Davis wasn't on. Yeah, he's always annoying. He's quite annoying.
I like Charles Davis. I don't know. I also wasn't listening to the game, so he very well could have been annoying. I was listening to that game on mute. Let's get into the Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen talk, right? I mean, this is the talk. This is what sort of this show this is what it all boils down to. And this is not an easy conversation to have, right? To me, sometimes an offensive coordinator can be good and competent, but he just isn't gelling with your franchise quarterback. And I think that's what the Buffalo Bills have to figure out over the next 10 weeks. Can Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen coexist? Is this a good fit? Is this a good marriage? Ken Dorsey is not a bad offensive coordinator. He's not. I have seen bad offensive coordinators. I've seen Nathaniel Hackett. I've seen Steve Fairchild, right? We've seen Tom Clements. We in Buffalo know Rick Dennison. We know damn well what a bad offensive coordinator looks like. Ken Dorsey is not a bad offensive coordinator. Is he perfect?
Mm-hmm.
No. Is he Kyle Shanahan? Is he Sean McVay? No, he's not. And I'm not saying he is. Few are. Can he improve? Yes, he can. 100%. He drew up some nice shot plays for Josh Allen in this game, and Josh Allen flat out whiffed. The Stephon Diggs one, that deep ball, really comes to mind. That's 7 points. That's like 80 yards on the board for Stephon Diggs, right? That's a game-changing play right there. Josh Allen overthrew him by like 6 yards. Like, it was awful throw. And there were some other plays in that game too. Eric's already done a really good job. Like when we were on the goal line and he scrambled and then he turned and he rolled across his body and chucked it to Stephon Diggs at the pylon. He had Khalil Shakir open. He should have been right at the snap. Should have been throwing that ball as his hot route to Khalil Shakir. And he just ignored Khalil Shakir, who was sitting there wide open. Could have lunged into the end zone for a touchdown. There were a number of occasions where Ken Dorsey called a good play and Josh Allen didn't execute it. That being said, he can be right? Ken Dorsey's philosophy can be right. Ken Dorsey's play calling can be good, but the philosophy can maybe be wrong. And Sean McDermott might come into play here as well, because it feels like to me, there's an emphasis in this offense this year in creating second and third down and short scenarios. I feel like the Buffalo Bills are really putting an emphasis on moving the chains, going on these long plodding drives, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sort of the old school New England Patriots, Tom Brady approach, right? But if you're going to do that, boy, do you need to execute, and do you need to end almost all of your drives in touchdowns. And right now, Josh Allen and the offense is not executing what might be very honestly competent play calling. The Buffalo Bills have gone from having an emphasis on chunk plays, aiming past the sticks on first down, getting down the field in 4 or 5 plays as opposed to 10 or 15. They've gone away from that this year. And I just don't know if this new approach that the Buffalo Bills have taken, even though it's an approach that has worked and has worked for other people, I don't know if Josh Allen is hardwired to do that. And I want the Buffalo Bills to be capable of doing both of these things. I want them to be able to run these long, plodding 10, 15 play drives when they need them. But I also think that we can have our cake and eat it too. That shouldn't be our identity. Our identity should still be aiming past the sticks on first down, chunk plays, trying to get down the field as quickly as possible. The other stuff should be a tool in our toolbox. It shouldn't be our identity.
And here's the other thing about this, right, is that can work, but the fact of the matter is when that's not working early in games, which it hasn't been the last 3 weeks, that really then compounds itself, right, as you start to go through your second, third, fourth drives, because then all of a sudden your defense is undermanned, as we know, with injuries.
Yep.
Other teams are scoring against you, and you feel like then you have to be perfect for 15 plays to come back and score. And you're not even able to do that in these situations early in games. That puts a lot of pressure back on the offense. And to me,
Mhm.
like the offense in the fourth quarter in these past couple games have scored a lot of points actually,
Yeah.
but the first 3 quarters have been pretty abysmal in
Yeah.
all 3 games. So it's like something's got to give. You gotta change some things up here. And I like the idea of the Bills being a really efficient offense. The Bills
Mhm.
are third best team in third down conversion
Yeah.
percentage this year, behind just the Chiefs and the Eagles. So like they're up there, right? Like they're converting third
Yeah.
downs. They're moving the sticks, but like it's not translating into points early in games. And I think sometimes too, like those statistics can be misleading because you have games like the Raiders game and you have
Mhm.
games like the Dolphins game where the offense just fires on all cylinders, and it kind of like detracts you from more of what's happened recently, which is the offense really out of the gates recently
Mhm.
has struggled mightily. And a lot of that has to do potentially with philosophy, as you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
Like we used to be able to count on things like Josh Allen off script runs for first downs or for chunk plays. And like we just haven't had that this year at all either. We haven't had the 20+ yard pass plays like they mentioned on the broadcast as much in the last 3 weeks, or really for most of the season, to be honest, that we've had in years past. So and
Mhm.
Monkey Business comes in and says fully healthy offense too. It's not like the defense where they have where they have injuries, and like that's also part of it, right? It's like yes, the defense struggled, but ultimately the
Mhm.
offense needs to carry the load for this team right now, and they're just not doing it.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it too, and you sort of hinted at this where it's not even like the offense is bad. They're just not scoring points. They're stalling out. Fumbles, turnovers, right? Missed field goals,
Mm,
penalties that sort of put you in third and long situations and force you to kick those field goals. They're just not finishing drives. And because they're these long plodding drives that we have now made our identity, we don't get as many cracks, right? At the piñata. We don't get as many opportunities to score points because we take up so much time on our drives that when they fail and we don't execute them to perfection and they lead to 3 or 0 points, well, we've taken up half a quarter, like,
mhm,
or even more than that sometimes. And then our defense, as you mentioned, is so hurt right now that other teams go on these long plotting drives and they take up the other half of the quarter. And all of a sudden, the Buffalo Bills don't have as many bites at the apple as they have in the past. I look at the Buffalo Bills right now, and we're going to have this conversation, right? 12 personnel has a lot to do with it. Buffalo Bills, and Dawson Knox is hurt now, so a lot of this is probably going to go away. But I looked at the top 5 teams in the NFL in 12 personnel usage. Number 1, the Atlanta Falcons with 139 plays this year out of 12 personnel. The Giants and Brian Daboll, number 2 with 114. The Bills were 3rd with 113. The Jaguars 4th with 108, and the Patriots were 5th with 108 as well. So then I decided to look. All right, the Bills use 12 personnel, the 3rd most in the National Football League. A lot of people are critical of 12 personnel. They don't want 12 personnel anymore, right? So let's compare it to other teams, other top offenses around the league. Chiefs, 10th in the usage of 12 personnel at 85 snaps. Eagles, 12th at 73 snaps. Lions, 9th at 91 snaps. I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, you want to decrease the amount of 12. You don't want 12 personnel to go away because look, the best offenses in the league, Chiefs, Eagles, Lions, they're still top 10 to 12. You want to decrease your amount of 12 personnel, but you don't want it to completely go away. You want it to be a tool in the toolbox,
mhm.
but you don't want it to be your identity. And some people will label, what about the Dolphins? They're 31st. What about the 49ers? They're 28th. Those teams are exceptions. And I put an asterisk next to those 2 teams because you know what the Dolphins are? First in the league in 21 personnel usage. They use a fullback. And the same with the 49ers. They're 3rd in the league
Mhm,
in 21 personnel usage. They use a fullback.
mhm,
I just don't want long drawn out drives to be our identity. I don't want 12 personnel to be our identity either. To me, I think this is a chunk play offense who functions best out of 11 personnel. That should be our identity. And what irks me is people who say things like, oh, shoot 12 personnel to the moon. Oh, shoot these long plotting drives to the moon. No, they need to be tools in your toolbox. I want to be able to run 12 personnel in short yardage situations on the goal line in bad weather. I want to be able to milk games with long plodding drives when we need to. I want my cake and I want to be able to eat it too. And I think this offense is good enough for us to be able to have that. Right now, I just think the Buffalo Bills have it backwards. I think that they are trying to force feed what should be an accessory as our identity.
Yeah, and I think things will get interesting now with the Knox injury, right, and the Morris injury, right, because the Bills may be forced a bit to reduce that, obviously, but what will be the long-term play here? Maybe this kind of forces the Bills into something that changes their philosophy a bit over the next however many weeks, right? And we don't necessarily know how long Knox is going to be out yet. Could be a couple weeks, could be longer, right? Could be the season. We don't know. When will Quentin Morris be back? What will the Bills do? Will they have to make a call up? We'll see. But we know one thing, like the Bills aren't going to just roll into game day with one tight end. Like it's just not going to happen. So something's going to give and we'll see what happens there. But
Gronk?
yeah, Gronk. Put it out in the universe. Who knows, right? But I think you're right. I think that it can't go away completely, nor it shouldn't. But at the same time, like this is maybe an opportunity to force the Bills into a slightly different philosophy over the next couple of weeks, especially this week with the short week. You're going to have to probably change your philosophy up this week because you only have a day or two to kind of get things situated. So, I tend to agree with you on that, and we'll see how long.
It's an interesting one. What's Lee Smith doing? That's an interesting one. And that is an interesting one. I got a couple of suggestions for what I think the Buffalo Bills offense should do, and I'm going to throw out my suggestions here, and I'm going to ask for your opinion of them. And if you have any suggestions too, you can throw them in, and people in the comment section throw in your suggestions about what you think the Buffalo Bills offense needs to do to sort of hit the reset button a little bit. And my two big suggestions are this. Number one, I think you need to take the restrictor plate off of Josh Allen in the run game. I feel like he needs to know he has the green light to play his most comfortable. I think he's been playing fine, but I think he can take it to another level if he is given the ability to run more. You can call me a hypocrite because I was definitely one of the people this offseason saying, let's run 12 personnel. Let's bring in Latavius Murray. Let's take the pressure off of Josh Allen in short yard situations. We can do that and still let him run the ball. So maybe I am being a little hypocritical, but part of reflecting and learning and growing is realizing when maybe you were wrong. And I think maybe we were all wrong in wanting the ball out of Josh Allen's hands in some of these running situations. Like sometimes you see him take a hit and you wince and you're scared, but you also see Josh Allen like get pumped up that he took that hit and it like psychs him up in a really good way. We've seen that before. And I feel like that might have gone away a little bit. So take the restrictor plate off Josh Allen in the run game. That's number one. My second, less 12 personnel, more 11. And we'll definitely get that now with Dawson Knox's injury, especially on early downs, right? Even when Quentin Morris comes back healthy, or if we add another tight end, or even using Reggie Gilliam, save the 12 personnel, utilize it still. Short yardage, goal line, make it a feature of the offense, not the offense. When Dawson Knox comes back, you can work him back in slowly. He doesn't have to be a focal point of your offense because you don't have to have two tight ends on the field all the time. Khalil Shakir and Deontay Hardy can play more and have opportunities. And it also opens the door for the Buffalo Bills to possibly make a trade to add another receiving weapon to this offense at the wide receiver position. We'll get to that in a moment, but what are your thoughts on those suggestions? And do you have any suggestions of your own?
I will say this. I definitely agree with your first 2 points. I still am a little bit hesitant on the trading for a wide receiver, only because like if it really is a trust thing with Josh Allen and why he's not going to these other guys, then I don't really see how bringing in a guy from the outside is going to help that. You also still need to translate what's currently happening with some of this play calling where guys are open and Josh is just not throwing to them. or he's not seeing them, or whatever the reason may be that he's not going to some of these open guys where guys are open on some of these play calls, and where Ken Dorsey probably needs to be absolved a little bit from some of the blame. How is that going to help that situation as well? So it sounds well and good to be like, we need to get maybe another complementary weapon besides Stephon Diggs. But at the end of the day, like, if that doesn't translate to execution and or trust on the field, then what good does that do you to make that trade? And I'm not saying like that should stop you from doing that necessarily, but everything I've seen so far this season leads me to believe like that move alone isn't going to help, right? Like, this has to be like there has to be a change in the approach and the change in the execution from Josh himself before something like that would, I think, translate from a trade perspective. But I do agree with you on the first 2 points. I do think you need to, as Aaron says, weaponize Josh Allen, let him use his legs more. And then also, as you mentioned, kind of the reduction in 12 personnel while Dawson Knox is on the mend and figuring out what's going on with Quentin Morris. So
we got Carl T coming to the super chat. I always appreciate you. Carl, he says, we love Josh Allen running. We don't like him taking hits. Run Josh, but slide Josh. Avoid contact. We also don't like him being our entire run game. And I agree. Like, I'm not saying make Josh Allen RB1 like he has been in years past, but maybe on some of these 2nd and 4 situations where we're running the ball to James Cook every single time, right? Like, maybe switch it up and get a design Josh Allen run in there. We saw Josh Allen on a design run take it for a touchdown against I want to say Miami Dolphins, the end of that Miami Dolphins game, right? Do that again. Like, throw some more of those design Josh Allen runs in the end, in the red zone or on 3rd downs, etc. Like, just get him a little bit more involved in the offense and maybe tell Josh, like, hey, maybe don't scan the field so much. Nothing's there. Don't feel obligated to sit there and wait and throw the ball away. If you have a chance to tuck and run, tuck and run. So that's sort of where I'm going with there. But in terms of trading for a wide receiver, I think a lot of people want to recreate Cole Beasley. Oh, let's go find the next Cole Beasley. And a lot of people are pointing to Hunter Renfrow as a trade target. I think Hunter Renfrow is a very viable trade target. He's an easy separator. This offense needs easy separators, guys who just, I don't know, get open. We saw it on Thursday Night Football with Christian Kirk, motto in the slot. He just wiggled. He got open, he caught the ball, and then he took it to the house to ice that game for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Buffalo Bills don't have a lot of that outside of Stephon Diggs, easy separators. That being said, I don't know if I want a slot only easy separator. I think I'm more looking for someone to come in and do what Emmanuel Sanders did, more so than I am looking for someone to come in and do what Cole Beasley did. Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, James Cook. I think some of those guys can do some of the things that Cole Beasley did in those short yardage situations. I'm looking for maybe like a downfield field stretcher, a guy who could play inside, outside, a guy who could take some of the pressure off of Gabriel Davis in the boundary. So Gabriel Davis can go pop off as like the 3rd option as opposed to the 2nd option. I'm looking at guys like Hollywood Brown, who Arizona says is not on the trade block, but who knows? It could be a smoke. Jerry Jeudy, Darius Slayton, DJ Chark, Darnell Mooney. All of those guys to me are easy separators. They are guys who can get open down the football field. They're more the Emmanuel Sanders type. And then you also have the Nuke Hopkins of the world too. So I would probably throw Nuke Hopkins more in. Like, he could play outside, he could play inside, but he's not exactly like an easy separator as much anymore. He's more of a contested catch guy. So, but he's still a crafty veteran receiver and someone who would only cost the Buffalo Bills $1.2 million because the Titans had already eaten most of that money. So Hopkins looms out there large as well. So I know you don't want to go the free or the trade route, but if you
go get Jahan Dotson, and maybe I'll be convinced that.
I would love to save Jahan Dotson from Washington. But people in the comment section let us know. Claude Puig comes in and says Darnell Mooney. Yeah, it's one of the names I mentioned. Let us know in the comment section. Is there a receiver that you are favoring? And Dave, Nuke Hopkins, Hunter Renfrow, Hollywood Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Darius Slayton, DJ Chark, Darnell Mooney. They all come with different baggage. Contracts are expiring. Contracts are a lot of money. We got to figure out how it works. aging guys. Everyone comes injury history. All these guys come with baggage. That's why they're trade targets, right? Like that's why some of their teams don't want them anymore. Of any of these guys, who do you possibly prefer? And Spin comes in and says Devontae Adams. I don't think that's gonna happen. But what do you think?
I liked DJ Chark as a free agent option a couple years back. I think like he would be pretty low cost. I don't know what the Panthers' vision is. Obviously, Adam Thielen has had like a renaissance there in Carolina, but like, what are the Panthers doing with their skill position group? I don't really envision that DJ Chark's really a part of that future. So he maybe could be had.
I don't think they want to take the veteran and Thielen away from Bryce Young too.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
So like, what is the future for DJ Chark? I don't know. Like he's had a couple okay moments. Hollywood Brown probably has the highest ceiling, maybe of all those guys.
I think he can be good. I think that he was stuck with Greg Roman in Baltimore, and I watch a lot of Arizona Cardinals games. Like he's flashed a little bit. Like it was tough in that Cliff offense, and it was tough with that Kyler injury and the assortment of backup quarterbacks they've had since then. I'll tell you what, Hollywood Brown is a better all-around wide receiver than he's given credit for. Like, I think he could pop off with a real quarterback.
Yeah, I think Hollywood Brown of that group to me presents the most upside. And I do think he's a guy that has been able to play inside and outside, and you can move him around. And I feel like he has a lot of upside. I think Darnell Mooney is almost like a poor man's Hollywood Brown. Like he's had a lot of flashes with the Bears in his career. Obviously, he's in a interesting situation there too as well. The Bears had like 10 different guys catch passes from Tyler Bagent yesterday. It was like a weird day for them. He's an interesting name. Hunter Renfrow, I'm not really that interested in him. I feel like he truly would be like just a pure slot type of guy. And I feel like at this point, with the way that Shakir has been playing in successive weeks, I wouldn't want to take that away from him necessarily. And also, you still have Deontay Hardy that you're still trying to figure out what to do with him. And he's had some nice plays. Like he made a really nice play to get that first down yesterday with that wiggle. So it's like, I don't know. Hunter Renfrow to me seems like it would take away from Shakir and Hardy more so than it would add otherwise to the room. So to me, I think Chark and Hollywood Brown would be maybe the most interesting, with Mooney being kind of like, I think Hollywood Brown would be the most expensive to acquire from a trade compensation perspective. I think Chark would be the cheapest probably.
And that's the thing too. Like the report coming out of Arizona is Hollywood Brown is not on the trade block. He's an expiring contract. He's not on the trade block. Kyler Murray's coming back. They love him there. He's a part of their future, blah, 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 blah. They traded a first-round pick for him. They're going to extend him, blah, 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 blah.
And they traded DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Yeah.
So, like, they're kind of trying – I think they're angling for the Hollywood Brown to be their guy, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that, or it could just be smoke because they're trying to drive up the price. Like, they might want to try to recoup their first-round pick for him, which they're not going to get. Maybe they're trying to get a second-round pick for him, which I don't think they're going to get. So, for an expiring contract, like, I don't think they're going to get it. I think guys like Jerry Jeudy, guys like Hollywood Brown, that's going to cost you a day 2 pick. It's going to cost you a 3rd round pick. I think both of those teams will try to drive you to a 2nd round. And I think that could be why that report came out, et cetera. So no one knows what to believe. You know, guys could be available that we have no idea are available. Guys who we think are available in no way, shape, or form are available. It's all just conjecture at this point, but a little bit of fun. And hey, we definitely need to, I've already started scouting the 2024 NFL draft class. It is absolutely loaded with receivers and a ton of different receivers that I think could add some awesome layers and elements to this offense. And I know we are in week 7 of the NFL season, but I can't wait to start talking draft in February because these receivers, man, it's a good thing you can't see my waistline right now. That's all I'm going to say.
How nice is it actually to see Seattle really starting to use JSN? Like, that's a nice trio they have there with him, Lockett, and DK. I know DK didn't play, but man, them going out, that just shows you, like, they didn't really need him, but they went and got him anyway. Like, man, that's gonna be nice for them.
Another name that somebody threw out there was Terrence Marshall another guy in Carolina. He played for Joe Brady on that LSU national championship team. He put up awesome numbers in college. He tested out of this world at like 6'2", 215, 4'4", 40, but he just hasn't put it together in the pros. So I don't know if the Buffalo Bills are willing to trade for that. I don't know if they're willing to trade for that. But he's a guy with familiarity with one of the guys on our coaching staff. So always a possibility. If Dawson Knox goes on IR and the Buffalo Bills decide to add a 6th wide receiver, maybe they trade a 7th round pick for like a Terrence Marshall and they give him a shot. So who knows? Speaking of receivers, last couple of things on the offense here before we get to the defense. Not a banner day for Stephon Diggs. 50% catch rate, 6 catches on 12 targets for 58 yards and a touchdown. Josh Allen missed him on what would have been a deep ball to completely change, I think, the entire way that the game was viewed. I think it could have broke the game wide open. It would have put Stephon Diggs over 100 yards, like all these different things. If Josh Allen just would have connected on that deep ball. Stephon Diggs also could have made an all-world catch with 10 seconds left that would have put the Buffalo Bills at like the 20-yard line with a shot or two at the end zone to win that football game. Stephon Diggs is the all-world kind of player who makes those all-world kind of plays. It stinks that he didn't come up with it, but he didn't. I don't blame him for it. I'm not mad at him for it, but that is something that is unfortunate. But what were your thoughts on Stephon Diggs' day? Because you want to feed him, but you need him to be way more productive than it was. And it was also compounded by the fact that no other wide receiver stepped up.
Yeah, and there was another play as well down the seam where the announcers were a little bit confused whether Josh was going to Diggs or Gabe Davis, and it was clear like he was going to Diggs and he just missed him. That would have been a big play as well, probably about 20 plus yards on that one as well. So opportunities were there to be had. Obviously, still Stephon Diggs still had his moment on that incredible touchdown where he caught the ball and then wasn't touchdown, got up and was able to shake a defender and get into the end zone. So he still made his mark. But yeah, the thing to me was that the deep ball, right? And we really haven't seen the deep ball much this year from this Bills offense. And that was a shot where he was open, had beaten both guys, and Josh just laid it a little too much to the inside. And obviously, in the last couple years before this year, we were kind of used to like the deep balls being thrown and seeing some of those overthrows, but we've also saw them a lot more frequently, right? And so there were some hits on those in prior years, and we haven't really seen the attempts as much this year to Diggs or otherwise. And so that was it for this game, right? That was the only real deep shot in this game, and it was a miss. And so it was tough. Now, look, I'm not going to really, to be honest, it's really hard for me to put a lot of the blame here on Diggs himself.
Yeah.
Like I just can't, right? I mean, like he was open on both of those occasions. That would have been big plays. He did still make a big play in this game. And obviously a couple of those were also like kind of uncatchable balls, right? Like the play you mentioned where Josh could hit Shakir and try to throw it to Diggs on the pylon. I mean, like that's borderline 0% catch rate, right? So it's like, I still think he did his thing. And like, to be honest, like he is the least of the problems on the offense right now. So not much more I can say about that.
Speaking of problems, I don't want to lose too much sleep over it because it was one game. It was disappointing to see, but it was just one game. I thought the interior offensive line was getting dog walked for a good portion of that game. Mitch Morse, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance. Like there was a lot of interior pressure, a lot of forcing Josh Allen out of the pocket. I was really disappointed in the way the interior offensive line played in this football game, at least in pass protection. I'd have to go back and rewatch, which I don't want to do, but I probably will, to see about their run blocking, which probably based on yards per carry was fine. But the pass blocking, no bueno, not great.
Yeah, I actually thought the run blocking did better than expected in this game. I thought James Cook, had some pretty good runs, and like obviously James Cook helped himself on some of those occasions as well. But it did seem like on a lot of the pass plays, Josh was bailing immediately. I'll have to go back and watch as well to see if that was like more of him just bailing or if it was truly pressure coming up the middle. But it certainly seemed like the offensive line pass protection struggled a bit more, which is unfortunate, right? Because I had covered in the pregame how the Pats were down Uche, and they really didn't have like necessarily any real pass rush threat necessarily. They didn't have another guy on the roster that was playing that had more than one sack on the season. So that was a bit disappointing. So I'll have to go back and check that out as well.
All right, on to the defense, and a lot to talk about here as well. Let's lead off with some really concerning statistics. This is from NFL Next Gen Stats, and this is about Matt Milano, specifically what the Buffalo Bills defense looks like with Matt Milano on the field and what the Buffalo Bills defense looks like with Matt Milano off the field. In the 2023 season, per NFL Next Gen Stats, with Matt Milano on the field, the Bills' middle of the field pass defense throws over the middle of the field. With Matt Milano on the field, opposing quarterbacks were 24 of 39. With him off the field, they are 23 of 29. With Matt Milano on the field, they've thrown 0 touchdowns over the middle of the field, 5 interceptions. With Matt Milano now gone, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions for opposing quarterbacks. Success rate allowed over the middle of the field with Matt Milano on the field, 50%. With Matt Milano off the field, 72.4% success rate over the middle of the football field. Pressure rate with Matt Milano on the field, 38.2%. With Matt Milano off the field, 24.1%. Quarterback's time to throw with Matt Milano on the field, 2.84 seconds. With him off the field, surprisingly a little bit better, 2.39 seconds to throw. So that is the only real statistic that has been upgraded with Matt Milano out. I already mentioned these statistics at the top of the show. The Buffalo Bills defense without Milano, White, and Jones, 209 snaps now, sample size, 5.6 yards per play, 24th in the league, 103.9 quarterback rating, 30th in the league, 54.2% defensive success rate, 29th in the league, 53.3% third down rate, 32nd in the league. All of these to some of the worst offenses in professional football. Yesterday, without Ed Oliver, the interior defensive line of Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Poona Ford, and Kendall Vickers were walked back and walked off the line of scrimmage with absolute ease. To me, I think the IDL problem is the crux of the issue, but what are your thoughts on just this porous defense against awful offenses?
I mean, this defense, whether it was Sean McDermott or Leslie Frazier, seems to really start and end with that IDL, right? I mean, without Ed Oliver in there, this defensive interior really set the tone, in a bad tone, really, for the entire game, I feel like. I mean, the Pats were running it pretty well. Even early in the game, I thought, like, yeah, the Bills' run D did okay, but, like, they were still kind of getting some plays. Stevenson was falling forward. Zeke was falling forward. A couple of unfortunate situations where, like, the Bills had 2nd and longs, and then they'd give up like a run play up the middle, and it'd be like a 3rd and 1, things like that. And obviously culminated at the end there with that last drive. And I know that was a passing play, but man, like the defense in that interior really just, it shows you how important Daquan Jones is. It shows you how important Ed Oliver is. And it really also highlights how good Ed Oliver had been playing as well. We knew how good him and Daquan were both playing together, but these are 2 really bad offenses the Bills have played the last 2 games, and they are going to have their work cut out for them in the second half of this schedule without Daquan Jones. And so you really hope that, I know it's a short week and he got a limited practice in today, that Ed Oliver is back sooner rather than later. And the fact that he did practice even in a limited fashion today, hopefully is a good sign that even if he were to miss this Thursday game, that he has this kind of mini bye to hopefully get right for the game after. And we know Tampa Bay is not really a great running team. So hopefully this is a small blip on the radar for Ed, but that interior really, they were really missing Ed in that game today or yesterday.
Monkey Business comes in and says the Bills aren't getting blown out. Defense is still giving us a chance to win. This is on the offense. I do agree that the Buffalo Bills offense had a chance to put it away, but the worst offense in football was given the ball, or the worst offense in football was given the ball with 2 minutes left. They had to drive the whole field to win the football game. They needed a touchdown to win, and they got a touchdown. That was bad. I would argue that what the Buffalo Bills defense did, or how they performed against the New England Patriots offense, I would say it was probably the second worst defensive performance this season in the National Football League, behind the Denver Broncos giving up 70 points to Miami Dolphins. I don't think that you understand the depth of how bad our defense was yesterday. And we're going to get into some even more statistics about just how awful they were. This is a team in the New England Patriots that literally was averaging 12 points a game. There was no excuse for them to score 20 plus, and we scored 25. So yes, it took the offense a while to wake up, but what the offense did should have been enough. Like, yikes. That defense was bad. I hope the crux of the issue is defensive tackle. I really do. Because then we just need to beef up one position, right? Oh, if we can just maybe add a one tech, go find a one tech. Linebacker will sort itself out. And then the safety play will get better. And then the corner play will get. I am just hoping and praying that the crux of the issue is one tech. There are people out there in free agency like Ndamukong Suh, right? He is a little bit older. He's long in the tooth, but he's a veteran option, a guy who's been there, done that. Akeem Hicks, Linval Joseph, they're available in free agency. Guys who are a little bit older, right? If you're looking to make a trade, Danico Autry, Tier Tart, they're available from the Titans, who are now in selling mode. They just traded Kevin Byard to the Eagles. You could go and get Harrison Phillips from the Vikings at the top of my list, right? Andrew Billings, he's a guy who really, really interests me. I'd really be interested in trading for a guy like him. And these are all from Greg Tom said here. A guy like Shai Tuttle would be an interesting trade target as well. It would be really nice if the issue was just one tech, and we could add a one tech, and we could stop the bleeding. But I don't know if that's the only issue. I joked pregame. I literally made a funny about it. Last year, Mac Jones threw a temper tantrum in his post-game press conference after Thursday Night Football. And he said what a joke it was that the offensive game plan for the New England Patriots was to just dump the ball off all game and pray the Buffalo Bills couldn't tackle well because they hadn't tackled well in the past. And that Mac Jones was mad because they didn't take any shots downfield. I literally made a joke that they had a JV game plan against the Buffalo Bills last year on Thursday Night Football. But then they trotted it out again on Sunday, and it actually worked. They utilized motions, which have been working against the Bills for the last couple of weeks. They utilized sweeps. They utilized end arounds. They put our linebackers and our DBs in conflict. They forced them to come up and make a tackle. And guess what? Our guys did not make a tackle. PFF registered 9 missed tackles, 2 on Terrell Bernard, 2 on Dorian Williams, 1 on Rousseau, 1 on Ford, 1 on Jackson, 1 on Poyer, and the absolute backbreaker that was Jordan Phillips, who had an awful game. The New England Patriots were just yards after catch per day, all day. That's all they were. Mac Jones' average depth of target was 3.3 yards, 3.3. And they took us to town with a simplistic, non-complicated, just get the ball into the hands of a fast guy and trust them to not be able to tackle. And it worked. It worked. That was a pathetic display of defense by the Buffalo Bills this week.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really. I mean, McDermott made the comment about like bringing Dawson in over Dorian Williams, and there was that whole like back and forth around like why did he come out of the game? They said they weren't getting things that they wanted out of that position. Like, seemed like a cop out to me, but you're not going to get a guy to Daquan Jones's caliber coming in through a trade, right? But you can get someone that's maybe an upgrade over Poona Ford. Jordan Phillips continues to just be a liability in run defense. Like, I don't understand how a guy his size is just not able to stop anyone in the run game. It just baffles me. And the Bills really need Ed Oliver back. So hopefully that helps a bit. And hopefully, Von Miller continues to ramp up. Greg Rousseau gets back to closer to 100% on that line as well with the foot injury. So there is some maybe better days ahead for this defensive line, but Yeah, the bottom did seem like it fell out a bit yesterday for this defense, or maybe they just tired, as Jessica pointed out earlier, because the offense had really been struggling to stay on the field as well in the early stages of games. So maybe they were just totally worn out by the end of that one.
Mac Jones's passing chart in this game, Dave, I don't know if you saw it from Next Gen Stats, but it will make you want to vomit. I mean, he was 25 of 30 for 272 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns. He did not turn the ball over. His average depth of target was 3.3 yards. He had 7 passes completed behind the line of scrimmage, 8 more within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, one of them for a touchdown, 5 more within 6 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage for the second touchdown. One of those were completed all 4 of his pass attempts between 10 and 20 yards and didn't complete a single pass over 20 yards. Fucking brutal. Just, I know I'm swearing a little bit more than I usually do tonight, and I've been trying to contain the swearing, but like, just, it was so hard to watch them just puke all over themselves. Jordan Phillips was awful. Like, just downright bad. When you ask him to be anything more than a rotational defensive tackle, he just, he folds and wilts like John Feliciano. Like that's what he is. He just folds and wilts. Terrell Bernard struggled. I'm not worried too much about him. I mean, it was absolute dog shit in front of him all day. It was bad next to him. Dorian Williams got yanked in favor of Tyrell Dodson. Somebody asked in the comment section, who's going to be moving forward? My guess is probably going to be Tyrell Dodson from here on out. Teron Johnson had his worst game in a while. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer starting to show their age without some of these all pros around them to buffer them. I mean, the New England Patriots had whatever they wanted over the middle of the field whenever they wanted it and got to the edge whenever they wanted to get to the edge. It was a brutal showing. I'm worried as the rest of the season moves on and as we start playing better, actual good offenses, not bad offenses, good offenses. Like, I'm worried about the middle of the field and tackling underneath. I'm not sure you can fix all of the ills that we saw in this game against the New England Patriots. That's why I want to focus on the interior of the defensive line, because one of the easy trades I think the Buffalo Bills could make, if the Buffalo Bills were all in on this season, they were serious about the season and they want to make a trade. Well, Carolina's got Frankie Louvu, who's a really good linebacker, Dante Jackson, who's a really good corner. The Buffalo Bills could probably find a way, if they're willing to give up some draft capital, to solidify a really good corner in Dante Jackson and solidify a really good linebacker in Frankie Louvu to put next to Terrell Bernard. Oh my gosh, that's a perfect trade in a perfect world. Like, oh my God, wow, that could totally turn the season around. Not if our interior defensive line plays like dog shit. Like, if Frankie Louvu ain't making tackles, if that interior offensive line isn't getting any push, right? Like, Dante Jackson, he's going to be struggling just as much as any other corner if our interior defensive linemen get absolutely dog walked. Like, I feel like, and I hope that the crux of this issue is the IDLs. I hope Ed Oliver can come back and he can stay healthy. And I hope the Buffalo Bills can find their way into another one tech, because they don't have one right now, because Poona Ford's not stepping up into that role.
Yeah. And that's a tricky trade market too, right? Because it's like, you really would have to be finding a team where it, like the Bills stylistically, the one tech they have is 2-gap style. Like, you have to find a very specific player, right, for that. I think like linebackers and especially corners, to fit into Sean McDermott's defense, corners especially, like those can be found, like decent guys probably in the trade market. But that specific one tech stylistically, I think is going to be hard for the Bills to find in the trade market. Not saying it's impossible, but like, I tend to agree with you. I think it starts from the inside out. And if the Bills don't get that interior defensive line sorted out, I don't know that the rest really matters a whole lot.
Yeah. To me, IDL is the most important. I think if I were to make 3 moves, if I were to add 3 players, and I've done a 180 on trades because I just saw Poona Ford get absolutely shoved around. I see Dorian Williams getting yanked off the football field every week. Like, I'm over it. Like, and I don't want Tyrell Dodson out there. So I've done a 180 on trades because it's clear the coaches don't trust Poona Ford, and it's clear the coaches don't trust Dorian Williams. So Well, why should I? Sign in Ndamukong Suh, give up a decent draft pick for Frankie Louisville and Dante Jackson, and I think you're cooking there. You add Suh to the IDL mix, you add Louisville to the linebacker equation next to Bernard, and you add Jackson at corner. I think if you make those three moves,
I like that.
I think if you make those three moves, I think we can get this defense back. Like I think back to average, like back to respectable. Because what we saw in that Patriots game, as I mentioned earlier, I think it might be the second worst defensive performance behind the Broncos getting absolutely plastered for 70 points by the Miami Dolphins. Like it was, people are like, oh, it was that bad. It was that bad.
Yeah, considering the opponent, right? And like that's the thing, 29. Like the Patriots scored 17 more points than their season average in that game, which is like 17 points is like middle to bottom third average, like scoring average in the NFL. It's wild to me. And Mac Jones was what, 20 of 25 passing? It was just, yeah. I mean, we're gonna sit here and talk about a lot of people are gonna talk about the injuries and this and that, but it's still a very bad offense, and like the Bills still had some horses on defense. So
didn't the Bills make 3 trades at the trade deadline last year though? Like Hines, Marlowe, am I forgetting one? I think the Bills made 3 moves at last year's trade deadline. I mean, they weren't obviously big ones, but I think the Bills made 3 moves at last year's trade deadline. I could be
might have been.
I might just be confusing AJ Klein with the move, but anyway, the last thought I have on defense too is this: whether we make moves or we don't, one of the things that we always hear is like how complicated Sean McDermott's defense is, right? Like, oh, it takes a while to master it. It takes a while to learn it. There's a lot of thinking that goes on pre-snap, a lot of communication that's involved pre-snap. When Dorian Williams was drafted, Dorian Williams, he can't play right away. When Terrell Bernard was drafted, he can't play right away. This is a complicated defense. This is a complex defense. They need time. They need to get ingrained. If we're down to the bare bones, right? Like we are. If we're down to young players like Dorian Williams, Sean, you might need to simplify the defense a little bit. Like you might need to make things a little bit easier. It might need to be a little bit more like see ball, get ball. Like some of the things might need to be made less complicated, so guys aren't out there thinking, they're out there playing. Like that is gonna probably play a role as well. Whether we make moves or whether we don't make moves, I think Sean McDermott's going to have to leave his comfort level a little bit. The man is prepared. Sometimes he's probably over prepared. And I made this comment on social media. Sometimes I think the Bills coaches over prepare these guys to a point where they overthink and they come out a little too rigid, a little too stiff. Micah Hyde made the same point. Like they're getting beat by every team who comes out there early, and they're getting beat by all these design plays and stuff. Probably because the Buffalo Bills are overthinking things and doing all those various different things. So maybe make things a little bit less complicated. That would be my suggestion. All right. In a moment, we are going to take a look at our opponent next week in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But first, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations all over Western New York. You can find them online at picassospizza.net. Again, if you're looking for some of the best pizza in Western New York, or even if you're not in Western New York, you're an out-of-towner like us, head on over to picassospizza.net and procure your pizza order. Eat your feelings, guys. Eat your feelings, right? That's what you might want to do. And before we get to that, I guess we got to talk about special teams this week. Sometimes we get to gloss right over this, but Tyler Bass has now missed 3 field goals in 2 weeks. There are some people saying that his field goal might have been tipped, but what is your concern level with Tyler Bass?
I mean, if we're really relying on field goals that much right now, then like we've got bigger problems, which you've already talked about. I do think that one was tipped, and then he came back and obviously made well, he did. He made the one first, and then the other one was tipped. But it doesn't really matter. I think like the week before, I had mentioned, like, those kicks he made, the kicks he missed were like, they were solid kicks. They missed barely wide. They had plenty of leg. This one was blocked. I think just a unfortunate couple stretch of games here for Tyler Bass. But at the end of the day, like, against the Patriots, against the Giants, like, field goals really shouldn't have mattered. Unfortunately, they did. And so, look, Tyler Bass, he's still one of the best kickers in the NFL. I'm not going to be too concerned right now about it.
All right, let's look ahead now to our matchup on Thursday night football with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, we will still have our normal pregame show. From what I've been told, Greg and Aaron, they're probably going to be doing something tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Might be pre-recorded. Thomas is going to be doing his Buffalo late night on Wednesday, so we are going to be free to do our pregame show hour leading up to kickoff on Thursday night. The Buffalo Bills coming on home to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'll tell you what, after what we've seen the last couple of weeks, I'm a little anxious about what we're going to see on Thursday night from a team that doesn't have a lot of time to rebound and to prepare. Baker Mayfield is a quarterback that, I mean, I still think back to last year when he like signed with the Rams and then like 3 days later won them a football game, right? Like he's the kind of guy who I feel like could go in cold or with 3 days of preparation and ball out. And he has some legitimate playmakers and guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to get the ball to. And then on defense, they got guys like Vita Vea. They got guys like Shaq Barrett. They got guys like Levante David who can make a quarterback like Josh Allen a little bit anxious, especially on a short week when we don't have as much time to prepare for them. This is a bad recipe on a short week. This Tampa Bay Buccaneers team is no pushover.
They're no pushover, and they've had a couple tough losses in a row, the Bucs obviously, but they have some talent. And, you know, one thing that may be working in the Bills' favor is Tampa Bay hasn't really been able to get the run game going much. So, you know, maybe that's something that, you know, the Bills can look at and say, if we're undermanned a little bit on the interior defensive line, this is an area where Tampa Bay has struggled as well. So maybe those two things maybe offset a bit, or maybe it's a situation where Tampa Bay finally does decide to get their run game going. We'll see. But Baker is a gamer. We know that. They have the weapons with Godwin and Evans. I like Kate Otten as well at tight end for them. So they have some guys, and I think Levante David matched up in coverage against Dalton Kincaid is going to be one of the matchups to watch in this game. Levante David did a pretty decent job against Sam Laporta 2 weeks ago in that game. And obviously I think that has been one of the comparisons that have been made a lot to Dalton Kincaid this year is the emergence of Sam Laporta for the Detroit Lions as a rookie tight end. So tough matchup for Dalton Kincaid with Levante David covering him most likely in that situation. If Roy comes in, and I think cynically says Tampa will run the ball for 150 plus yards.
And I was just so I'm looking at the box, and this is just the box score because I'm not gonna pretend like I watched this game. I haven't had a chance, but the box score from Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay's had their struggle running the ball the last couple of years. Rashad White had 13 carries for 34 yards. That's 2.6 yards per carry against the Atlanta Falcons. His long was 13 yards. Keyshawn Vaughn, the backup, had 4 carries for a whopping 7 yards. That's 1.8 yards per carry, a long of 9 yards to go along with his 7 yards rushing. So that says all you need to know. Vaughn ripped off a 9-yard run, and then in his next 3 carries, managed to get back down to 7 yards. So that's the kind of day he had. If they run all over us in this game, that's bad. Like, that's short week or not. Like, that is a real indicator of just how fucking terrible the depth IDLs are on this football team. Like, Jordan Phillips, do something. Tim Settle, do something. Poona Ford, do something. If you can't stop Rashad White and Keyshawn Vaughn, the fuck are you doing in the National Football League? Like, I don't know what to say at this point. I really don't. Like, I think that'll be a really good indicator of where this team is at. Because if that team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, make it a point to run on us and are successful in doing so, that's a big yikes for me. Win or lose that football game, that's a big yikes for me.
Yeah, big yikes. And whether or not you have Ed Oliver or not, like, you got to be able to, like, this is like, we knew coming into the Pats game, like, the Pats really hadn't been great running the ball, but they still had Zeke and Stevenson. And, like, we knew that was a possibility. Like, Tampa Bay has not been able to run the ball worth anything this year. Like, you cannot let that happen.
RJ Melville comes in and says, we got Judge Dredd tonight. I'm just like, there are some things that could break me, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running all over us could legitimately break me. Like, going back and rewatching this football game and seeing how bad Jordan Phillips was, the missed tackle on the Stevenson, just getting absolutely pushed off the ball and worked in every single play. Like, it broke me. Like, it absolutely broke me. Like, and it can get worse. Like as you said earlier, like, we haven't reached rock bottom. We can still, there's still further we can plummet.
There's still further, yes.
Again, looking at the box score from Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and again, I'm just going off a box score here. Rashad White had 6 catches for 65 yards. That scares the hell out of me, right? Because we saw what guys like Ramondre Stevenson did out of the backfield against us in this game. Then you have some really fast receivers, Chris Godwin, Devin Tompkins, a guy we loved, Kendall, our boy Kendall, before he got too big for us, too big and grown for us. He loved Devin Tompkins. Right, all 5'5", 165 pounds of Devin Tompkins, and Trey Palmer. They got some dudes who, if they want to utilize that sweep, right, that motion, those end arounds that have been kicking our butts the last couple of weeks, they can get some of those guys out in space and give our corners some trouble as well. So they got some guys outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin who could give the Buffalo Bills some fits as well.
Yeah, they do. And, like, I mean, you think about who the quarterbacks are that the Bills have gone up against the last couple of weeks. Like, Tyrod really wasn't, like, striking a lot of fear into you. Neither was Mac Jones. But, like, Baker could get hot, right? Like, he's got the capability in him to get hot. And him and Mike Evans have been really, like, connecting well so far this year. So, like, if a lot of attention goes to Mike Evans, trying to slow him down, some of these other guys potentially could make you pay. Chris Godwin hasn't necessarily had that breakout game yet this year, but he could be a factor as well. So, it's not going to be easy for the Bills on Thursday.
And they're stout at the middle too. I mean, Vita Vea, Greg Gaines. I think Greg Gaines is a very underrated IDL. Then they have Levante David. They have Devin White. I think still he's not the best football player in the world. Should he have been a top 5 draft pick? He had that one really good season that might have justified it, but probably other than that, not so much, but he's still a pretty good football player. Then you got Ryan Neal and Antoine Winfield Jr., who I think are 2 really good safeties. And then you got Jamel Dean and you got Carl Davis on the outside and you got Joe Tryon and you got Shaq Barrett rushing the passer. Like, they're shallow. There's not a lot of depth to this Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team, but they still got some ballers, right? Yeah. From when they were all in with Tom Brady. So they still got themselves quite a defense that I think on a short week, a lot of crafty veteran players that could give the Buffalo Bills some issues. So it'll be really interesting to see if the Buffalo Bills can go out on Thursday and send a message. Because I'll tell you what, on a short week, if our offense can come out and they can look crisp and they can look clean and they can put up a burger on this defense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, which I think is pretty solid, I'd feel a lot more confident. But this is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that has scratched and clawed in some ugly games over the last 2 years, playing in the NFC South and not being the most talented team in the world. Right. We talked at the top of the show. The Bills are average now. Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a lot more experience being average since that Super Bowl run. They've had 2 years of just figuring out all this average out, and they've won some ugly ass games over the last 2 years. So on a short week, this scares me a little bit more now. With all the injuries the Bills have sustained, with the way they're just out of sync. Yeah, I'm not feeling great. So hopefully by Thursday's show, I'll have a little bit more of a positive spin for you.
Get yourself mentally right in the next couple days, and then Thursday will be hopefully bringing the positivity on the pregame show, getting ready for that one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, after this show is over, after this show ends, we would really appreciate it if you would comment on this video with your biggest takeaways from Bills Patriots, or maybe a free agent you'd like to see the Bills pursue, or a trade you'd like the Buffalo Bills to make. Just leave us any type of comment in the comment section. It really helps boost us with the algorithm, boosts our videos, and it really helps to support our show. So if you could do that, we really appreciate it. And as always, keep commenting in show. Your guys' comments really make the show what it is. And we really appreciate you guys in show. So our next show is 3 days from now, 7 p.m., leading into Bills Bucks. And Dave, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!